Hello, friends. Welcome to Club, the C Club podcast. My name's Jess, and every week I get to bring you conversations with the people pushing at the edges of the social crypto space. Today is a very exciting interview with Jiho, who is a co-founder and community lead at Axie Infinity, a little project you've probably heard of before. I was enthralled in this conversation from the get-go. I look at Jiho and the Axie community as being leaders and early examples of the value that community can play and create in the crypto ecosystem, and the size and scale and just tenacity and intensity of this community is really something to witness. We dive into the story of both Jiho and Axie Infinity. We talk about what it's like to manage like literally the largest Discord server in the world. They have pushed up against the cap, and get into a lot of, I think, what Jiho calls community design. So thinking through how to grow, manage, incentivize, reward, and give ownership to people creating value in this community. Jiho has a wonderful term where he sort of focuses so many things through the idea of freedom and ensuring that their users and owners and participants have freedom to own and participate within this ecosystem they're building. I'm very pumped on this conversation, so let's just jump into it. So excited to have you on the podcast today. Jiho, how do you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jeff, or Jiho. They're both my names. I'm a co-founder of Sky Mavis. We're the inventors, the creators of Axie Infinity. Yeah, I do community design, economy design, all kinds of stuff. I'm a lifelong gamer. I'm a lifelong collector.
I love it. I just throw that to you there. And like, I think the funny thing here is that most people listening to this podcast right now are 100% going to know who you are. You have it's just been this meteoric rise of Axie Infinity over the last little while. And I think so I think that's, amazing. Well done. Giddy up. We had a chance to chat briefly in Denver a couple weeks ago. And the thing that really stood out to me was just how little I knew about like the early days of Axie, and how so aligned, I think, in our worldviews we are, especially around the power of community and the value of community. And so almost like the genesis story of Axie was very interesting to me. And so the second I heard that, I was like, this is a conversation that we should be having on the podcast. So there's like a number of threads that I want to get into, but maybe just to set the scene a little bit, what were you doing before Axie became like the most talked about thing in the world of crypto?
Yeah, so we started Axie in 2018, and right, we kind of we built throughout the bear market. I think Axie has always been very community driven. I started out as a community member where I just in kind of spring of 2018 got some Axies and started to ask, right, like, okay, what's next, right? What do we do with these things? What does the future of utility around these battle pets look like? So yeah, we were building. We always had a very tight knit community, and that was the thing that made us, I think, especially in the early days when we were really small. That's what made us really confident that we were onto something super special, right? So even in the early days, in the first year, people were making Axie musicals, right? Cloud White got an Axie tattoo. They were helping with the development, giving feedback, so we're kind of like building in public, right? So when Axie started, you couldn't even see what your Axies looked like actually. So we've kind of gone from really literally nothing on day zero to this kind of full blown digital economy that's now kind of helping people and developing nations put food on the table, and obviously become so much more.
So many threads to pull on. Very interested in the early days, right? Because I think we're in this sort of explosion of and resurgence of value and community. So community is a big thesis of C Club, and I think across many of the folks that we sort of share in common is this idea that value in Web3 will flow to communities, or at least very much is based on it. But it hasn't generally been the case, and so I think a number of communities are sort of experiencing this 0 to 1 moment of going from an idea to the first few people, or from the first few people to sort of that first sense of momentum. What did that look like in the 0 to 0.1 moment in the Axie land?
It was a long road where, right, we kind of toiled in relative obscurity through a bear market. But yeah, I think like we were always right, laser focused on this goal of introducing the world to crypto through something that's fun and accessible and nostalgic, right? So our North Star was always right to get to a product that would bring so much joy to people that our even our crypto native users would be able to and would be itching to introduce it to their right, friends and family. So 70% of our users right now were actually onboarded right through a referral. So if, like friends and like our core community, just spreading it to people that they know that they think would be kind of helped by this product. And yeah, we've gotten to this point where 50% of our users have never used crypto before. 75% are totally new to NFTs as well.
Okay, so I hear like a very strong mission from day one. Are we talking about like 3 people, 100 people? Like, what did that early team look like?
Sure. So originally it was 2 people, Trung and Masamune. Trung is our CEO. He has a technical background, and he brought in, right, he was an early CryptoKitty player, and he brought in his buddy Masamune, who I think didn't know anything about crypto, but was a super strong artist, really into kind of like cute creature design. So that was kind of like the original duo, right? I even think of them as early, right, like generative kind of art, right? Because Masamune came up with right, like the art and the concepts for the body parts and the art for the axes, and I think Trung, right, he designed like the mixer, right, to basically determine right, the algorithm that determines what an axie actually looks like. So from there, right, I think they got a couple of their buddies in Vietnam to join the team. And somewhere in there, myself and Alex or Psychouties or COO, who we actually knew Trung from CryptoKitties, we kind of joined the Axie community and started helping out right on like community growth related stuff, business related stuff. So that's kind of like the early days. We also had our CTO Andy join that summer of 2018. So it was like we had a very, very small team. And, we were working out of a studio apartment that we called it's kind of like an office. Very few people ever visited that office, but it was like really magical moments, in 2018. Super small team. Yeah. Building with, I think like the community was maybe 200 people at the time, but they were all super, into Axie, it's really excited for the future, telling us constantly what they wanted to see, testing, right? So we had like an initial early version of a battle system that was actually auto battles that, they gave a lot of amazing feedback on. And it was just amazing to have the community there from day one, really building alongside us, right? I think, some of our values are really, right, like co-ownership and also co-creation alongside the community.
When I hear you talk about Axie like that, to me, it is like probably the first clear example in my mind. Maybe there are others, but a very clear example, at least, of like the power of community in Web3 and just how leaning in very fully with a small group of people can create just exceptional leverage and opportunity. And even the story of how most members are coming in through referrals, like this idea, I think, of onboarding mainstream users into crypto seems like it's a big one in the Web3 circles. And I think there's a number of folks who approach it through the idea of like trying to water down Web3 and make it more accessible, easier, but ultimately can give up on some of the core principles. I think that it sounds like you hold dear as well, which is the idea of co-ownership, etc. And I think this idea of DAOs being or communities being like the place where you are given more time and support to get over those early humps, or actually might be the solution to maybe not all of our user experience challenges, but at least to many of them. Maybe just to drill down on that a little bit, I think in our previous conversation, you're talking just about how ardent and active and almost proud users are about bringing people on and about being that early support. Like, how do you think that culture evolved within your community?
Sure. So I think, right, like we a lot of people, right, they think that we've designed this like, economy, right, like from the beginning, like understanding like exactly how the positive feedback loops would would look like. And to be honest, right, like I think we just started from first principles where we're like, one, gamers actually deserve property rights. So they should be able to own their game assets as well as pieces of the games that they play. Right, so they should be able to sell their game assets to anyone, anywhere in the world. Yeah, there's also this idea, right, that yeah, games should be owned by the communities that play them. Gamers should be able to turn their time and effort into real value. So I think these are some of the principles, right, that we kind of started building with. And right, even though right, we took a very iterative process, but I think like our those principles really informed the way that we built our products, and then we started to see like emergent behaviors, right? Things that we might not have necessarily even envisioned, right? Like the scholarship model, that was something that was actually created by the community, where right, if people Axies, kind of got quite expensive, especially as you were able to use them to earn tokens, and right, so then community members realized that hey, like they were able to basically lend these Axies out to people in developing nations that really needed them. So I think that was a big part of it is right like we stayed true to those principles, basically freedom. And when you give people freedom, they start to do all these amazing things that you might not necessarily have even projected or been able to predict because in many cases, right, like gamers have never had like true freedom before, I think. And so a lot of things that have happened with Axie that seem really special, I think are just uh, offshoots or byproducts of the fact that gamers are finally having rights that they've never had before.
So, I have the pleasure of speaking with a lot of early stage community builders and projects and DAOs. And almost inevitably, whether folks admit it or not, and I'll even admit it for myself, there's this fear around giving up control, especially around a game or around IP or around your baby, right? And I think there's a wonderful piece of when people take responsibility, there's this feeling of wanting to steward something into the world. So I think that can kind of compound this idea of, or at least the fear of giving up control. And I really liked how you framed it as giving people freedom. And it sounds like, in the way that you just answered that question, that so much of the magic behind the success of this project has come through these emergent behaviors based on freedom. What would you say to somebody who's maybe recognizes that this is probably the way they should be leaning, but is feeling blocked or friction in being able to fully embrace that?
Sure. I mean, I think part of it was, a lot of us were people that wanted to build games or work on games our entire lives, but never saw an entry into the space, right? Like, how do you, as an indie game developer, right? Someone didn't really have right, like that much experience. How did you even break in to the space, right? So it's like if you're a David, how are you going to go up against the Goliaths for us, right? That was always, I think, right, like being more open, giving certain freedoms to the community. I'll also say that I think we have definitely managed, right? We believe that, there is some level of coordination, especially in the early days, and some blood, sweat, and tears by, right, like core contributors that is necessary to get that engine running, right? I think you do need people who really dedicate their lives, especially in the early days, to, get the network effect going. So yeah, I think that the people who get it will be the ones, I think, in the early days that kind of right they're looking for a secret weapon, right, or an edge against the larger incumbents. That's also why I'm a little bit skeptical of incumbents like embracing this, really quickly. I think it'll be the smaller indie game studios, right? They might be really great game designers, they might have really great art, but they might not have the funding, the distribution, right? So you have to kind of lean on the community because I think that right, like that organic grassroots momentum and spirit is, I think, the only thing that can overcome like the structural disadvantages that you have from being small. So there are a lot of advantages to being small, right? You can have a really tight knit community, right? Like, so what are the advantages of being small, and how do you use that to start something that could potentially one day become big?
I love that. I've been trying to find a way of phrasing this idea that, people when they're joining or say buying into a DAO or purchasing into a game like Axie, it's less about the transactional nature or the utility. It's less about just buying the NFT or buying tokens to access a community. It's more about almost buying a ticket to an adventure. And then this idea of participating and being along for something that's bigger. And I think I too share the same skepticism around how large organizations, game studios, IP holders, etc., will step into the space. I don't think you can manufacture that feeling of momentum and authenticity and adventure that comes from, well, yeah, from trying to make progress towards something that's bigger than any one person. I think that idea of David versus Goliath and sort of, fighting back against the incumbents or the evil empire or whatever is just so key to this. And I'm really interested in how teams sort of start to engage with this idea of world building and story building and progress building around that adventure versus the utility and the token farming or economics. It seems like a very big opportunity to do things differently. And I think without a doubt, it becomes very, very difficult to do that if you all of a sudden have 1 million people in a Discord, if that's even possible, versus, 100 people that are like really, really give a shit. I think that's absolutely fascinating. So, okay, give us a sense of like the size and scale of Axie today. How do you describe that?
Yeah, so we have just about 2.1 million daily active users. We're the number one NFT project by all-time volume at around 2.4 bill. Yeah, there are merchants that are accepting our in-game resources as currency in places like Venezuela and the Philippines. Yeah, we've started to, I think, get on the radar of governments because they're like, okay, what is this? Is this the future of work, or is this something that we we need to try and control? Um, yeah, I think, there are vibrant Axie communities that are also like venturing out into the real world or the physical world, I should say, right? So, one of the things that I'm doing out in the States right now is I just held a meetup in New York. I'm going to do one in LA. And so yeah, I think we have these like really vibrant communities that are also like, like, after 2 years of lockdown, starting to hang out and face to face. So yeah, I think we just raised a Series B, I guess, of around 150 mil for Sky Mavis. Yeah, we have 2 million wallets. So we built our own Ethereum sidechain called Ronin. We have over 2 million wallet downloads. Over $5 billion been deposited on Ronin, our sidechain as well. I don't
This
know.
is
Yeah, what else?
wild, man.
Yeah.
This is wild. I mean,
We
that's
just we
not,
just
that's,
gave out $100 million in access tokens to our 10,000 founding community members. So we took a snapshot, I think, on October 26th, 2020. So less than a year ago, actually. And back then, right? Like we only had 10,000 community members. So it's really it's gone exponential just in the last 12 months or so.
yeah, I think that's a very helpful snapshot because I think it is like, I mean, it's insane. It must have felt like an absolute roller coaster. And just want to underline what you said there at the end there, $100 million to your first 10,000 users. That was an airdrop snapshot that was taken over a year ago and was just recently given out. And I'm assuming there's sort of a deep strategy behind that around timing. Do you want to maybe share a little bit about how you're thinking about that?
Sure. I mean, so first of all, like doing the airdrop, it was something that we wanted to make sure people understood was going to be a thing when we announced, the token, because I think like it's kind of in line with our ideals of co-ownerships. But it was also something that we like took some technical time to do, and then also like we wanted people to be able to. So we launched the airdrop with the release of staking as well, right? So it's kind of like right, like they got the tokens, but they could actually do something with the tokens when they received it, and made sure that there's something other than just selling it to do with the tokens when they received. So
Yeah, I think I get the sense that there's sort of like there's a lot of value in waiting that long too. And I think it almost like this idea of retroactive or thanking people for the value they're created and really recognizing early actors, I think is such an important idea. And it probably has a lot more gravitas now, just given how much change has happened, the scale it's happened there. Playing with timelines and sort of the nuances around how we might be creative around airdrops, I think is still such a big thing. And it's such a magical part of Web3, right? This idea of getting ownership for doing shit.
I loved our airdrop. I think it was one of the most creative that's ever been done. So basically, when the weighting was not right just done by I don't know like trading volume, right? It was trading volume, axes that you're holding, land that you're holding, and then battles that you're winning in the arena in the actual right like application. So it's kind of like 4 different buckets of activities, right? That kind of each reward different archetypes of players.
Yeah, I mean, you just have so much more of a design space when you're playing a game and thinking about how you reward people for it versus maybe a DeFi protocol, right? I think that's cool that you leaned into it. If you were to look back over like the last couple of years and look at the community growth of Axie, how would you chunk it up into stages? Like, was there very clear epochs or evolutions?
Yeah, I would say like there was the days before any gameplay. That was kind of like the golden era of the community in many ways, because right, the possibilities were endless, right? Like it could be turned into anything, and right, like that was a lot of hanging out in the Discord, dreaming, talking about the future. I mean, it was still sometimes could get really quiet and even lonely. I remember I would say good night, GN, and not just good night back then. And then I'd wake up in the morning, and that would be the last message in the Discord. Right now, like like yeah, we have to put on slow mode. So yeah, that was definitely right. There was that, and then there was like the auto battle era, which was okay. Like we're starting to understand the playbook. We're starting to understand what people want to see from this new type of game. And we started to see, oh, like, we're starting to get streamers on board. It was like the early generation of streamers. We then, right, like upgraded the battle system to, away from auto battles to a real time kind of card battle system. Uh, that was actually December of 2019 when that we released that. So then we saw, okay, like the next stage was, okay, like these in-game resources are now, right, instead of having experience points that were stored in a database, we now had potions that were used to actually create new Axies. These potions were tokenized, and then we saw a community member create a Uniswap pool for the tokens, and then we're like, wow, like okay, you can now basically, right, like actually earn some money by playing Axie in a very kind of uh, like easy to calculate kind of way. And then, yeah, it was kind of like right, like the liquidity for that for the potion started to kind of explode, and the bull market came, and then that was kind of I think like the real growth catalyst, and yeah, and then I don't know, like we then had the IEO launch on Binance, which I think like really like put us on the radar of kind of like mainstream crypto people. And then I think like the next big stage was right the migration to Ronin, where right we'd been on Ethereum. Every time Ethereum started to have get more popular, right? Like gas prices would spike, and that would basically dampen our activity. So Ronin, right, is our Ethereum sidechain, right? We call it Ronin because it's really about taking our destiny into our own hands, right? So we basically migrated everything to Ronin. So we called it the Great Migration. And then basically made it super smooth, super easy to interact with Axie to play, and that allowed right like scholarships to expand and scale, and just whenever like we have cut down friction in our ecosystem, we've seen our growth just spike and go into a new trajectory. So I think yeah, and we're now entering I would say a new era where right we're about to I guess we're about to pretty soon I would say upgrade our battle system I guess for the second time. And we also have a DEX that's coming, right? So like one of our ideas is that products should be owned by the communities that use them, right? So it's like that applies obviously to our game, but I think that also, right, like it should apply to Ronin and the DEX as well.
So what was sort of jumping out to me as you tell that story is just the amount of innovation that happened across the crypto landscape from when you started in 2018. Obviously, some of which you've been very involved in, but even like the advent of like a Uniswap that allows you to sort of unlock a lot of that value. Were there other sort of really notable composable tools that kind of came into your world that really changed how you thought about or developed the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the AMM was key. Like, I think that was like a light bulb moment for the entire industry. But I think we had that light bulb moment for how that would affect the future of gaming first. And I think that's been a big part of our success. I think a lot of the research around like side chains and scalability, it's taken some time to like marinate and mature. And I think it's still happening where, right, Ronin right now is kind of like a POA side chain. We're plan on upgrading the security mechanism, or I guess the consensus method, right? Something maybe that's closer to proof of stake, but then maybe like turned it into a true layer two over time. It's still quite early, right? So we're watching. So I think that's going to be really important. I think right, like, money markets, like, Aave and Compound. I think those are going to be really important in the future, right? Like we have plans to basically get into, maybe doing something like issuing a debit card, right? And so basically, I think that's going to be super powerful, right? Where we're getting card, kind of these, yeah, we're getting debit cards into the hands of people who've, maybe never had even had a bank account. Then once you have that, it's like, okay, maybe do you also have a money market as well, right? Like where people can deposit their in-game resources and then get, right, like access capital. Um, so I think like the whole DeFi wave has definitely like, right, inspired our understanding of like us, right, like being able to branch out into kind of periphery products. I'm super excited, and yeah, we've definitely been inspired by the rise of DAOs, right, like these distributed organizations, right, like how do you have something that's community owned, um, right, where community members have more of a say? How do you balance that with, okay, like, maybe needing to be able to move relatively fast as well, right? So I think like we're kind of moderates maybe when it comes to, right, like I guess decentralization, where we definitely believe in empowering the community, but also believe that, right, like in the early days we'll have a really strong part to play in the future of this, and yeah, and basically building out this network. Long term, we definitely want Sky Mavis to be one of many entities that's building content for the Axie universe, I would say, right? Like I think the community is now like doing the majority of maybe like the content creation, the education, and the onboarding. And we're still, we still have a central part in the kind of, I guess, like the development of the content and the gameplay. But I think like long term, it's going to be impossible for us to build everything that our community wants to see. And we definitely want to see Axie become this, right, like internet monster IP protocol that others can build on top of.
Yeah, I think that the thing that so many people sleep on when they're thinking about play to earn games as a category, gaming, blockchain gaming as a category, or even community DAOs, is once you have that audience or that user base, the natural extensions or the ability to pull in these DeFi tools, I think are going to be like a big value driver for a lot of these organizations. Like we have a couple projects we're working on that really see themselves as being like building more of like the fun vibes community that is ultimately going to be powered by a bank or a lending protocol, right? Like the idea of being able to gamify or make some of like the DeFi tools or actions that you can take there just fun and more a part of this brand world that's being created, I think will create a whole lot of value for these communities. And I think like there are thousands of people, right, that are earning better than full-time wage playing Axie. And so it's very much kind of like, I mean, I guess the corollary would be like, I think Uber has a debit card. And so you can get your payouts from Uber into your debit card. So of course, why wouldn't Axie have a debit card? And then some of these folks that wouldn't even have a bank accounts right now, and it's probably prohibitive to do it. And the fact that you've built a whole sidechain that allows an infrastructure there that allows for like very inexpensive transactions and access. And I mean, the thing that just stands out to me is that you said you started with your North Star of wanting to, make a fun way to onboard millions of people into crypto. Like, do you feel like you've achieved that, or is there still a long way to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, like the farther we go on our journey, the more we realize that we might only be 5% done. I think there's like a meme that like I used to say that we were 10% done. Now I say 7.5% done. I guess now I'm saying we're 5% done. So, right, it's an endless thing that just, right, like the potential gets larger and larger. So I think like, right, that North Star is really important. I think we still have a long way to go. It's still super hard to get started with Axie. Uh, so yeah, I think like, right, like definitely, we want to make sure that, okay, like the benefits, like the economic opportunities, but also obviously the fun and the social network that you can tap into, these are being kind of compounded upon. But also, yeah, that we're, right, like making the user experience easier. Like part of that will be, right now, in order to start with Axie, you have to do a kind of unintuitive thing where, okay, well, first you can, I guess, like apply for a scholarship program. But even if you want to, get your own Axies and you can afford it, you then have to, right, be like, okay, like I need to buy game assets for a game that I've never played before, right? It's a little bit non-intuitive. And then they have to go to YouTube, figure out what Axies to buy. I mean, shout out to our YouTubers; they're doing an amazing job, right? But it's not necessarily ideal, right? Because you're going from like awareness to like hard activation, kind of, and without all this, the steps in between. So our, new upgrade to the battle system, we're calling it V2. Basically, will set people up with free Axies that they can, use to learn how the game works, whether they think the game is actually fun and is something that they want to be a part of before they have to make these kind of larger economic decisions.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I almost want to change subjects here, or at least tax a little bit. Before I do, obviously there's a new battle system coming out. Sky Mavis, you raised a bunch of money into that. What is that? Maybe not the new North Star, but like the immediate sort of next big shifts. Like, what does $150 million in the bank account really unlock for the future world you're building?
Yeah, so yeah, I think definitely upgrading the battle system, make upgrading the art, the animations, the mechanics. I think that's going to be key, and right, getting the right talent to make sure that this is something that brings a lot of joy to our community. I think that's super important. Yeah, also right, like the release of this Dex, but we also have a land-based game that's under development. We're calling it Project K right now. It's kind of similar, right? Basically, you'll harvest resources, build structures, eventually battle for territory. Um, in the far future, right, be able to kind of build experiences or games on top of that land. So that that's something that we need a lot of resources, a lot of big brains for. So yeah, and then I think like an SDK, maybe even like yeah, it's, an SDK to make it super easy for people to build on top of Axie. And then yeah, I think also right like onboarding the next generation of right like NFT game developers. Right, like what does that look like? Who are these people? We're still kind of scoping it out, and we're definitely right. Like we see this as a paradigm shift. We see this as the new way of building games, and we think that there'll be right other like compatible IP as well that we may welcome into our community.
So there's news out today, Friday, October 15th, about Steam blocking the distribution of any crypto NFT focused games, period. Interested in your comment on that. And then also the comments on the news story announcing this were just filled with a number of gamers who were very excited about this news that, NFTs are burning the environment and just scams. And there seems to be like, along with sort of the artist community, the gaming community seems to have a ton of animosity towards NFT games, etc. So curious what you think about the Steam news, and then B, more generally, just like that vibe or anti-NFT-ness in gaming.
I mean, I think there needs to be a lot of education that's done. I think we need to have empathy. I think with any new technology, especially something that maybe involves economic stuff, there's going to be a lot of skepticism. I think also a lot of gamers, right? Like a lot of gamers, a lot of crypto people are gamers, right? Already, right? So it's like the gamers that kind of got it, like might have gotten in like kind of early, and their friends might be a little bit salty, like seeing like oh like my friend that's not as smart as me like made a lot on crypto, right? I think there's part of that. To be honest, like I think there's a little bit of that salt involved, because a lot of gamers that are yeah they're not into crypto, like a lot of their friends probably like did quite well, and they feel like wow like why did why did that happen to me, I guess. But yeah, I think there needs to be a lot of education done. I think with Steam, I think that this is all part of the dominoes, right? Like this is all going according to plan. We are building out Mavis Hub to be right the NFT game distribution kind of store platform of the future. So we see this as a huge opportunity. I think they're playing right into our hands here, right? Like they have chosen a path of a walled garden, something that's closed, giving less freedom to gamers, and we have chosen a different path, which represents right property rights and freedom for gamers. And I think we're just going to keep repeating that. We're going to pound that home, and we're going to build our products with that in mind.
Yeah, I love just how clear the contrast between worldviews and strategies and directions are there. And I find it very hard to believe that we'll be 3 years into the future and much further down the path of understanding why it's important to own the digital land or the networks that we are building so much of our economic futures on. So I think it's in retrospect, it was inevitable type thing. Just maybe need a few years out. So, okay, one thing that I want to make sure I get to here, because I'm very curious as somebody who's kind of fallen into being a community manager of sorts. Though if I had that title, I think I'd be a really
You're a
horrendous
community
one. But
designer, man. That's the new wave.
well, I mean, so okay, yeah, I guess so. I think like it's definitely expanded my idea of what that meant, and I think just showing up and being eager is really gets you a long way down the path. And I think you talked about empathy earlier in your last answer. But I would really love just to sort of get a window into the community operations in Axie today. Like, I think there's very few communities. In fact, I believe the Axie community is the largest community on Discord. You may or may not have broken it and needed to split into two. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have hit the hard cap on Discord of 800K. This means that we've basically exceeded the limit, and yeah, we've had to have a spin-off Philippines Discord, Spanish Discord, Portuguese Discord, Korean Discord, Japanese Discord. I think there's more in the process of being spun out. So yeah, we're starting to we're starting to reach, right, like we're starting to counter things like, okay, we've solved maybe like blockchain scalability for the moment at least, and then it's like, okay, now we're brushing up against like social scalability. That's why I'm super bullish on, right, like the whole, the collab lands of the world, right, like Snapshot, source cred, coordinate, right, like all this like tooling. I'm not going to call it necessarily DAO tooling. I'm just going to call it like social coordination and community coordination tooling that is going to basically allow us to answer, right? Like last year we didn't have users and we're trying to figure out how do we get attention and how do we retain attention. Now we kind of have figured that out with, right, like NFTs, basically both gaming and art and collectibles, etc. So now we kind of have an understanding at least of the playbook around that. Now it's okay, like our communities are actually, they're too big to be able to coordinate and to be able to recognize the contributors and reward them in scientific ways, right? That's why I've been talking about community design, because it's like, yes, we're not like, sometimes it might feel like we're managing things that are happening to us, right? But I think, right, the future is about, okay, how do we scientifically design systems that are right, like recognizing, elevating, and rewarding the right people with the right amounts for the right actions with the right rewards, because different people respond differently to different things.
Yes, the number of people that are actively engaged in your world on a daily basis, 2.1 million active daily users, 800,000 people in this Discord. I'd love to just take a window into what it looks like to like functionally operate a community of that scale. Like, can you give me a sense of like what your team looks like that's involved in that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, so we have around, I think around 60 volunteers who are kind of like, channel mods, angels, moderators within the Discord, right? Like making sure that, okay, people know like, okay, you can use this support desk if you're having this issue, like answering like just, questions, and also just, making sure that people are having a good time. So yeah, it's like, one of the things I think about is like, how do we recognize them? How do we reward them for the amazing work that they're doing? Also, right, like how do you basically keep the idea of like bottom up contribution going, right? Because it's not scalable to do everything yourself. We do have, right, like a support team that's also kind of like, coordinating and shepherding within our Discord. I would say it's still probably undermanned and understaffed, and obviously we're always looking for amazing community builders to come and join. Yeah, I mean, we're trying to start to standardize things, right? So I'm very like particular about, I'm like a Discord, I'm like not OCD in anything except for like Discord, for example. Like all the channels like need to be like properly formatted. Like the emojis need to be like actually like standard size. Uh, right, like the announcements need to like have this clear format that is repeated. So yeah, I think, and this, we also have like, I don't know, okay, so how do you deal with scammers? And we have a lot of like secret uh, mechanisms to basically get the scammers out of our Discord, and basically identify and ban them. I'm not even going to mention what they are, because then they might find out and try and use a different method. But so yeah, I think, I mean, it's a lot of iteration, it is very chaos, right? It's trying to basically manage chaos I mean, things like Collabland. So we did a Collabland integration. It was actually like a lot of work for them because they had to integrate Ronin. It's kind of like, it's stuff different from Ethereum in some cases, but also some cases very similar. But the Cloudland, I think, we've gotten amazing feedback on that, and it's basically allowed certain channels to basically, kind of get back that, tight knit vibe. So basically, right, like, yeah, Collabland, had made it so, okay, like, you can't speak in this channel unless are verified to own at least 3 Axies. Like, one of the interesting things is Axie, our tokens have like futures, right? So there might be people who, right, like, short our tokens and then come try and, right, like, send like a bot army into our Discord of chat bots to try and, like, create FUD and chaos, right? So it really is important to make sure that the people who are speaking actually have some demonstrable skin in the game. So yeah, anyway, shout out to Collabland. It was so helpful to have that integration, and we're gonna be like escalating on that integration as well. Like, we're basically will be trimming the people who have not verified over time. So because we need that space, right? Like, we only have 800,000 slots in our main Discord. There are 2.4 million, I think, people who own Axies. So.
Yeah, I think it is such an interesting thing. I was talking to James from Collabland a couple of days ago, and he talks about about NFTs as reputation. And I realized I was thinking about reputation differently than he was. And he was talking about it much more in the sense of being able to verify and prove that you are a part of a club or an owner, or that you truly have skin in the game and act in something like Axie. So holding, with Squiggle DAO, you needed to hold a Squiggle to be able to access Squiggle DAO, and holding 3 Axies is to give you access to certain channels. It does create a meaningful differentiator and a sense of reputation, even if it's not quite the way that I was thinking about it, where, you kind of have like maybe more of a credit rating system or something like that. So you're talking about angels and about mods, and you said they're volunteers. Why are these people volunteering their time? And is this a significant commitment?
Sure. I mean, I think, like, the amazing thing and the best way to inspire bottom up contribution is to have immaculate distribution, if that makes sense. Right. So this is why, right, like, people who are into community are so, like, obsessed with distribution, because you can like design these like grant systems, whatever, right? Like, where you're rewarding people with tokens and stuff like that, like, kind of very, I don't know, like some kind of top down like mechanism. But I think, like, the best and most natural way to do it is to make sure that, right, like, there's a lot of people in the world with skin in the game, and, right, when they own a piece of your ecosystem, they want to help, right? And the same thing, like, I think about back to myself. I bought 3 Axies, and then I started asking, like, okay, like, how can I help? So I think that is like the that is like the kind of amazing path of a community, right? Like, community contributor, in the Axie Discord. But we also have artists, right? We have musicians, we have animators, we have meme creators, we have community developers building like analytics tools, and we've even had mini games built in the past as well, which is something we want to do more of in the future. So I think, like, that distribution, right, making sure that the assets within your ecosystem are distributed. I mean, so that's why it's like I always say, like, the biggest risk of centralization is having a small community in the long run, at least, right? So you want to have some path to basically have a large and diverse nation, right? That's like, I think about like Federalist number 10, I think, where Hamilton said that the biggest threat to the republic is to be small and not diverse, right? So you want to be large and diverse. This actually like creates the most resilient type of nation in the long run. So I think we think a lot about that as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, it really is. It speaks in favor for, I guess, much more trying really to lean into the distribution or the broader distribution. And so, like, would you consider the airdrop being like the core mechanism used there, or was there other ways that people like how did you get that broad distribution?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, it's like there's distribution of NFTs, and then there's distribution of that, the governance token, which are kind of separate things. Right? I mean, so with Axies, I think like there's 6 million Axies, right? So it's like the biggest, like, right, I think one of the most amazing things I think about our journey is, right, like, yeah, we don't have 10,000 Axies, right? Like we have 6 million. So how do you maintain, how do you grow the population of Axies to 6 million while, ensuring that, they're valuable. I think that was, that's kind of like the thing that we were able to pull off, that I think, right, like the rest of the NFT place space still has to figure out. So right, like we have, so many people who own Axies, and right, like, but then, yeah, also with the governance token, I think, right, it was a lot about, okay, making sure that the messaging is correct, right? People understand that this is something that's important. This is something that's a pillar of the universe, and this is something that we want to be owned by a a large number of players. And I think it was, yeah, also a lot about the design. And yeah, I think a lot of it is timing, right? Like, you can't go back, you can't create a time machine and be early to NFT games, right? Like back when we were doing it, right? Like we were attracting the missionaries, the people who were in it because they thought it was kind of interesting. They thought it was fun. They weren't necessarily in it for, right? Like, I don't know, quick gains or something like that, which obviously, right, like as the space matures, more of that is going to come in. And the OGs are going to be like, like, it's annoying. And yeah, but I think like there definitely is something to say that, right, like our original supporters, original community members, they were, they're these missionaries that, were in it because they believed in the mission and doing something interesting. And they're thinking about economic stuff. They were at least doing it with a very long time horizon.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I'm very curious what the experience of, I don't know how you feel about talking about price, etc. My question here really is around like the feeling about being in and having, I guess, your efforts and your work represented as a token, and seeing that token just go from really not worth anything, I mean, truly having no value, to, I mean, I don't even know what the 1000x% ish gain that these tokens have had. I'm really curious about what, like, how do you manage that as, as somebody leading a community, and what does that even feel like to be a part of that roller coaster?
I think it's, I think we try not to let all the success associated with the token really change the core values of the community. I think the good thing is that, right, if people did really well because of the token, oftentimes it was the right people, the people that, right, like because of that freedom, right, they were then able to spend more time in crypto or in Axie, right, kind of dedicate more time to the mission. Um, I think, yeah, it's obviously something that, right, like you have to manage carefully. And I think it is about, right, like repeating the mission, making sure that people understand that this is about something more than just financial gain, but it's something that I think is about something more important, which I think can be distilled to freedom, right? A form of freedom for gamers, property rights. Um, I think these are things that are, right, like the most important and are at the core of what we do. And the other stuff, I think, kind of flows as a natural consequence of, okay, are we being successful in spreading this movement to the people who really need it?
So there was a conversation I had Lee Jin on a couple episodes ago, and there's this thread. I think it came up Eric Arsenault in the Rarible DAO conversation, and the idea was like a core underpinning of Rarible, in much in the same way that it is for Axie, is this idea that the community should have ownership, and so there's this ability to earn tokens through various mechanisms on the site. And one of the things they saw was that most people were just dumping those tokens, and that capital was reforming in concentrated fashions by people who were, more of an investor class that were going out and buying them because they sort of believe in the future of the project. And so this idea or the mission of giving ownership to people actually was falling short for some reason. I think the hypothesis is either maybe there wasn't just some mechanism design issue there, or there was a general lack of education and understanding of why owning a token is valuable today, potentially more valuable in the future, and important in some way to the new holder of it. I think you've sort of touched on this in a few ways, but I'm curious, like, How do you think you guys? I mean, it sounds like most of people are still holding tokens and are excited about it. How have you designed for that? And maybe like I'm sure your answer will include education in some form, but I'm curious like specifically how you approach that.
Yeah, it's not perfect, I would say. I think like even a lot of the people who got airdrops, they had right like they'd bought tokens when it came out, and then after the 100x they might have sold, and then they're like, oh, like I'm trying to get back in, and right. So I mean, that was the beauty of the airdrop too, is it like got it back into the hands of the people who felt might have made a mistake, right? And sold too early because I mean it was life-changing money. So I think yeah, obviously the messaging and I hear people say like I don't think about access in terms of the fiat price. Like I just think of it as like I want to own a certain percentage of Axie Infinity because it's something that I love. Um, so you have people who think like that. And I think it's also about yeah getting it into the hands of the right people. Um, and right, so I'm yeah, we distribute it through our game, but we also do like kind of contests, and we would definitely want to ramp that up over time. Um, yeah, I think it's a hard question, but I think yeah, definitely like the messaging and making sure that people understand that right, this is really important for the future direction of this project, and it's something that right, like if you believe in this, and something that you might want to own. Uh, yeah, I don't know. There's it's also right. I think like yeah, there's it's a thing of timing where right, like there's this whole culture of holding and being proud right and to own a certain amount, and right like this feeling of emptiness if you don't own a certain amount, and right like being people feel like right the Axie community is amazing, people want to be a part of it, they want to own part of it. Um, so I think right it's a lot of the social capital like that's backing it, and a lot of the people who want to own it. I think it's also right like yeah about smart mechanism design, right? So like uh, people see that, right, like Axie is the top revenue generating application other than Ethereum. So, they think about like what that might mean for the future of the token as well, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a. I mean, I love that answer, and I think it just speaks to how complicated and multifaceted that is, and also how much work we have to do as a space to educate. I mean, being like acting in Web3 right now really requires a whole lot of reading between the lines as to why something might be valuable or people perceive things to be valuable, and it's not super obvious right away. And I think like NFTs and gaming have made it a lot more obvious. It just sort of fits a world that we already understand and is a much more of a logical step. So I think that's fascinating. Listen, we're up on the hour here, and I just really appreciate you spending the time with us today. I love that I get to have these conversations and to start pulling on threads that are absolutely fascinating to me. And I think, as I said to you privately before, like I really see you and your team as just being, a few steps ahead in this big game that we're all playing, and tackling some of the challenges that I think so many projects are going to have to face at some point. And so, like you stepping into that role and being an educator and sharing your time with folks like ourselves, I think is just extremely valuable. So I want to thank you for that. To leave it off, really would just love to hear what you were the most excited about in the Web3 space today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are just this hot ball of momentum right now and energy. And I think I'm excited because it seems like NFTs have kind of like taken charge of the narrative, and we're kind of like now I think the aspect that most aligns with the ethos, right? I think like Coinbase chasing OpenSea and NFTs, right? I think kind of shows, right, like how right that didn't happen, right? Coinbase was never chasing Uniswap, Binance was never chasing Uniswap, right? For the most part, right? So I think like yeah, the fact that NFTs have kind of like come out and started, I think like to lead the cultural movement. I think it's just like a dream come true to me. I'm super excited. I think it's going to get crazier over the next 12 months. And yeah, I mean, I think like yeah, I'm super excited to see like what is the future of yeah social core. Like how do crypto communities, NFT communities, DAOs start to impact the real like the physical world, the Muggle world, with all this right like knowledge, capital. kind of power, right, that we've accumulated. So I think that's the next battle for us, and I'm ready for it.
What a great way to leave it. Jiho, appreciate you spending your time with us today. Where should people go find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I'm just Jihoz_Axie. Yeah, you can find me in the Axie Discord if you can find a slot. That's discord.gg/Axie. Yeah, and check out Axie Infinity, AxieInfinity.com. Yeah, if you've been waiting to get into Axie, I think like we have some upcoming catalysts right around like the launch of the V2. Maybe that'd be an awesome thing to keep an eye out for.
Well, I think our audience is very, very much focused on this intersection of Web3 and community. And I think my guess is anybody listening to this interview would have a renewed interest in going and at least kicking the tires of Axie Infinity if that's the first time, because I think feeling and seeing some of these mechanisms and getting a sense for that community could be extremely educational. And, it's definitely something that I'm keeping my eye on and have learned a lot from. So appreciate your time and really looking forward to hopefully another one of these conversations and whatever that next level of unlock is in your world.
Thanks so much, man. It's been an honor to be here, truly.